representing Franchise Secrets, Erik Von Horn.
Hey listeners, if you're not in the Franchise Secrets Facebook group, what are you waiting for? It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Now, this is a large community of franchisees, franchisors, buyers, sellers, anybody that's involved in franchising in any way. It's the community to go to. Ask your questions, get answers, help people out, and get help. It's franchisesecrets.com/Facebook. Welcome to the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Erik Von Horn here today with my friend, mastermind member, franchisee that is just doing incredible things in the world of franchising, Nik Blum. Nik, thanks for coming on, man.
All right, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Dude,
been looking forward to this for a long time.
Oh man, I know that you listened to the podcast for a while. We got to know each other. Let's go back. Let's share the story of how we got to know each other, how we became friends. I got a call from you or an email that says, hey, I'm interested in your mastermind. So then we got on the phone, but it started before that. We were on an app which was blowing up called Clubhouse. I was on it a lot at the time, and I haven't been on it in ages. Who knows if it's going to be a thing or going to be dead here soon. But that's how we first met. Remember that?
Yeah, man, that was crazy. I was in a search for finding someone who had a lot of experience in franchising, which is honestly not an easy thing to find. And so, I dropped into Clubhouse. I started searching for franchising, and you were at the top of all the lists. And so, you were talking, and everything you were saying was just hitting me like a sack of bricks. And I was just like, God, this guy just, everything he's saying. And so I started listening to your podcast, and I'm like, holy shit, this is just too much to be true. And so I finally just reached out. I listened to so many of your podcasts that I felt like I was already talking to you. So I was really excited to get on the phone, and, I can't even believe we're doing this podcast, man. It's just exciting to spend time with you and, be able to interact with you and hang out. It's awesome.
It's been fun. I remember that first phone call. I remember walking, I think there was probably some roosters crowing because I was walking outside, and we were talking and about the mastermind. And it's not cheap to get in the mastermind. It's not super expensive, but it's not easy to pay to get into the mastermind. And you're like, Is it going to be worth it? And we were just talking. And I never like to pressure anybody, but like what you wanted to get out of it, you were wanting connections and some of the things that you were wanting to learn for your business at that time, and kind of how you're expanding RNR Tire Express, like what, and it's not just a quick, easy expansion. There's a lot of thought that goes into it. You had a lot of moving parts. And I was just thinking in my mind, I said, dude, just join, because you will definitely get an ROI on your fee to pay to be a part of the mastermind for a year. And man, in my mind, as I was saying that, I'm thinking, I've got all of these connections for you, Nik. I've got all these connections in Austin for you, but I wasn't going to try to tell you that. I just wanted you to experience that. And man, you paid, jumped in the mastermind, you're giving it, you're all in there. And then fast forward, you're meeting these people that I was thinking about introducing you to anyway. The funny thing is, like, you met my buddy Justin Donald in Spearfish. I don't think you met him before in Austin, but you guys both live in Austin. But he's a guy like that I wanted you to meet. So remember, what was going through your mind at that time when you were thinking about investing money for access to relationships, access to things to help you in your business? Because there's a lot of people out there that they never reach out to somebody that can help them get to where they want to be faster.
Yeah. It's funny because I started reading that Dan Sullivan book, Who Not How. I just started reading that, and it made me think a lot about like our relationship, because you talked about that you had connections in Austin, but you didn't like to say who they were and kind of bridge into too much of that. And as we became more friends, better friends, and I came out to Spearfish, all of those people were there. And so I expected to talk about franchising the whole time, but next thing you know, I'm meeting all these people that I've heard on podcasts, that I've, looked up to, that I'm like I'm reading their books, I'm just, next thing you know, I have their phone number and I'm texting with them, and I'm like, now I'm having lunch with Brian Holmes on Monday, a couple guys I'm having lunch with on Friday. There's this volleyball game, Front Row Dads. You got me connected to that. I mean, you have exceeded all my expectations from a connection standpoint. And I'm just, cause I never had I just didn't know anybody in Austin who was doing and thinking about the things that we're talking about. And so, I feel like I'm kind of in kind of alone in a lot of ways in this journey. And so, just exciting to have some aspiring minds that are doing things that are ahead of me that now I'm actually communicating with. And so I would have never imagined that it would have worked out that way. And honestly, we were on the phone. When you told me how much it was, my first thought was, "There's no way in hell I'm going to pay that." I'm out.
But you did.
But I did. I did it quick too.
Yeah, you have to do that quick sometimes, and you have to get an ROI on it. And I've been there. I've been in your shoes multiple times, and it's always paid off. But anytime you pay to be in a group, it's not just about the Franchise Tribe Mastermind. Anytime you are paying to go to a conference or go to an event or something like that, you just need to go ready to get an ROI on that. It doesn't mean talking to everybody in the world, but you need to go with the intention that I'm going to get a return on my money and return on my time with these things that I'm investing into. And I think a lot of people, they think, oh, it's money. It's $10,000 or $20,000 or $50,000 or $100,000 that you're investing into something, and you have access. But then it's up to you to go and actually do something with that, show up. And I've seen a lot of people that they don't do that in different groups that I've been a part of. And then some people, they excel and they just are ahead of other people in the group because they just come in to win and to get a return on their time and return on their money. And I've just seen it over and over and over. So man, I'm glad you said yes. I'm glad you got in. Let's talk about your franchise. So another thing that I love about you is your humility, and it's genuine humility because you think everybody else is doing bigger things than you. And I'm like that a lot when I go to some of these big masterminds or these meetings with really important people. What I come to discover is some of these guys aren't as big as I think they are. And some of the people in the mastermind think I'm doing bigger and better things than I really am. So a lot of times I am not the guy that's achieved everything. I'm not. But I love the humility of and there was other people that came to this meeting in Spearfish that are doing incredibly well. Most people wouldn't know how well they're doing, but I know who they are and I know how well they're doing and how humble they are with it. So I just love that about people. I love that about you. So let's talk franchising. Talk about your first and only brand, but a brand that you're getting ready to expand with. So how did you get involved with RNR Tire Express?
So it was, so at the time I was working in a corporate job. I had worked there for 20 years, constantly with an itch of, doing something on my own. So I wanted something that was similar to the regional position that I had. And so I hired a franchise, consultant. My business coach connected me with them. And so all I literally did was I went online, I had them sending me some, I was reading franchise agreements, and, I found that none of them were meeting the criteria that I were looking for. And so it was getting very frustrating. And then my best friend at Sprint, where I worked, a buddy of his who was a very successful entrepreneur just approached him one night and said, "Hey, I got this opportunity. It's called RNR Tire Express. I already vetted them. Do you want to be my operator?" And he had done the same corporate job as me for 20 years. And he called me and was like, "Dude, this is like the smartest guy that I know asking me to be an operator. And I have no idea if this is a good deal or not." And so I had him explain to me that it met all my criteria. I was like, there's no way in hell this is even possible. And so he said yes, and he quit his job and did it. And then I asked him, "Are you okay if I explore this path?" And so I ended up going down the path with R&R Tires. I didn't have the money to do it because it's an expensive, franchise to join. It was literally like 4 times what I could even consider putting into a franchise. And it ended up being even more than that.
That's franchising. It ended up being more than that. That's franchising.
But, a close friend of mine who I grew up with had been telling me you need to get into your own business. And he was willing to open up wireless stores with me because that's what I had specialty in. So he looked at this, and I got him to sign off on the financial agreement with me because he had millions of dollars in his bank account. I had like almost, I had basically like my 401k, and which was, not even enough to buy one of these stores. And so we ended up going through the process with his financials, and he ended up saying, I'm out. It's going to take too long. And so I ended up not really telling the franchise that and kind of keeping my foot in the door. And then I started calling around to some of the other franchisees. And there was one that it was in Austin. I went and visited the store, and it looked like just a old wheel shop with like naked pictures of girls leaning up against cars all over the walls, like a rim shop, old school. And I called this guy multiple times. And on Christmas Eve of 2016, he called me back and said, we went bankrupt.
Oh.
And so I was like, he's like, do you want to buy my assets from me and buy the business? And so I ended up going to all these banks. I found a nonprofit company that helps low income, business owners. And I borrowed exactly the amount of money I needed, which was about a quarter of what a normal store costs. And I basically went almost fully bankrupt after I'd fully gotten the store up and running. But we ended up doubling our business every year for like 4 years. And today things are going pretty good. And now I'm in a position where I can open up more stores.
Now you're in a very different position from where you were when you first started. Like, what was it at that? If you would have had a bunch of money at that time, do you think you would have had the success that you had, like the grit just to be able to do it? Or would it have helped you just knowing like you and who you are? Because I look at from the outside and it's like you were successful because you had your back up against the wall and you had to make it work. But maybe you would have been more successful if you had the money just because of the things that you already have inside of you. Like, have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think honestly, not having enough money and not having the resources and not having a coach and having my back up against the wall and getting all the way in the first year and a half, because I was working my full-time job and doing this. I got down to a point where literally I was taking my entire paycheck and putting it into the business to survive. I had my accountant and I had another franchisee who was helping me with my books telling me, like, you're going bankrupt. Do you want to go bankrupt now or do you want it to get worse? And honestly, I think I needed that to happen for me to, learn how to do it, fight my way out of it, get fired from my corporate job and figure it out. I've always been that way. Like even with sports, growing up, like I always thrived on like the pressure. And that's when I really I'm one of those kids, I got to get punched in the face to learn the hard way. And so I wanted more money. I was asking banks for more money to make it easier. But I think in turn, I wouldn't have been such a penny pincher on buying things. I would have wasted money on so many different things that I didn't know better. So honestly, I think I wouldn't change, how bad it was.
So here's an interesting topic. I like where we are right now because there are people listening that are on the verge of bankruptcy. And there are people listening that are going to get fired from their corporate job in a month and their back's going to be against the wall. And, so I hope that this is encouraging to people, or maybe they're a part of a franchise system that's not the best franchise system. And if you are doing okay in a bad franchise system, that's encouraging. If you're doing okay in a franchise system where everybody's doing really well, well, maybe you're not meant to be an entrepreneur, because, I love it when I see people that are part of that things are going bad in different ways and their backs are against the wall and they make it work, or they're part of a weaker franchise system and they're doing really well in that. There's some people in our masterminds, we won't name any brands, but there are people that are in our mastermind that are part of pretty weak brands, but they're crushing it in those brands. And I'm like, if they can crush it in that brand, they could go to an average or an above average brand and really crush it. So like, if you were part of a franchise that is not the greatest, or you don't think it's the greatest, don't worry about it. Just crush it there, do as well as you can, and know that you're learning things today that are gonna make you really successful in a good opportunity, a good franchise, a good system, a good marketing, good sales, good support. So, I think it's good to talk about that. But when I didn't know where you're gonna go with that, because I was talked about my story a little bit. When I sold Sola, I had excess cash in the bank. It was 7 figures plus just sitting in a bank account. I'm like, what do I do with it? And I started making bad decisions. I had extra money, felt very comfortable, and started making bad decisions. I hadn't really made a lot of bad decisions up to that point, but I started making bad decisions. And I've heard that from other people that have excess money. Whatever it is, if it's an extra 7 figures, 8 figures, 10 figures, they're not making the decisions that they used to make. And that was definitely me when I had multiple millions in the bank. And so now I like to invest in things. That's why I'm starting a mastermind for investors, to invest in different things, to learn how to find passive deals, investigate those deals and whatnot, because I want to make money, but I want to get it out of my bank account so I feel poor and that money's working for me. But there's something when I don't have access to that money, it's working for me. I don't have to work for that dollar again, it's working for me. And I start to make better decisions because I don't feel fat and happy because of a bunch of money in the bank, especially now with inflation. So like, what are some of the lessons that you've learned that you want to take with you through that, or any comments on the things that I just shared?
Yeah, no, I'm the same way. And I think it took me a long, I'm like one of those guys, I'm just bad with money. I think I'm bad with it. So, there's a book I read called Profit First. And one of the models in that is to set up lots of different bank accounts so you don't really have access to the money. I know some people look at that and think that's just silly. Like people only do that when they're brand new. But for me, I try to treat my relationship with money like I'm a 15-year-old, and I'm like trigger happy to spend it everywhere I can. And so I try to hide my money from me. But it's funny because I was talking with another franchisee who has a lot of money, and then I also, coming from a corporate job, I think when you come from corporate, like retail, those big companies will spend abundance of money on things. It could just be the floors, which are not going to make you any money, but just there's those little things that they will spend large checks on. And so I was having a conversation with this guy, and he's like, yeah, the floors looked a little rough, at his place. Not bad, but like they were a little worn. He's like, yeah, his business was losing money. And he's like, I'm going to spend 20 grand to fix these floors. And I'm like, I would spend that 20 grand on marketing, and I think for me, I came from the same thing early on. I was like, I'm going to spend money on this really cool display. I'm going to spend extra money on these chairs. I'm going to spend extra money on this, little like giveaways and things that were not making you money that you were spending, money on. And so I think that early on, when you come into a franchise, at least for me, it's really easy because a franchise has a gazillion things, Trisha, you can buy from their shopping cart. And you can just blow so much cash on that stuff. But honestly, for me, it was like, I got to a point where if it's not going to make me, I will only spend $1 if I'm going to make $3 on it, and in my case, it was, I'm going to spend $100 on this tire and I'm going to make $800 on that tire. whatever it may be. We normally will 4x, 5x, our profit in this particular business model. But that was the big lesson for me. And I had to get up against the wall to start thinking more like that. People told me that. Like, I had a guy who told me that early on, like, don't spend shit on anything unless it's making you money. And I'm like, oh no, I wanted to just look really good over in that part of the store. And those were huge mistakes.
So that brings up another point. Franchisors out there, like, what you're hearing from Nik is what your franchisee's mindset needs to be able to be successful, to be able to open up a second unit if it's retail, or a second truck, or a second van, and to be able to scale their business. I've seen in the franchise world with franchisors, they start to tend to have products for their franchisees to buy that look really good, but it might not give them an ROI. They'd rather have something that looks good versus spending money on marketing. Mm-hmm. So the faster that your franchisees can reach profitability, the faster that they can expand. They can go to location 2 or 3, or they see a path to 10 or 12. That's a really good thing. So franchisors, don't get caught up on having the most beautiful location. Get caught up on, how can I get these franchisees open with the least amount of money as possible and spending the money in important areas. An important area is marketing. When I was over at Mighty Dog, we wanted our franchisees to open up their locations with a lot of money going towards marketing. As I'm advising other franchisors, emerging brands that are wanting to grow fast, I'm advising them, put more money into marketing, front load that for your franchisees. So 2 things. 1, they can build it into their loan and their model and whatnot, but also they get in the habit of spending money on marketing, and they see marketing as an ROI versus having a fancier truck or a fancier location or a fancier sign or whatever it is. So ROI, like everything in franchising, from royalties, the franchisees need to be thinking, how can I get an ROI on my royalties? Franchisors should be thinking, how can I help my franchisees ROI on the royalty that I'm charging them? So anyway, that's a little bit on my soapbox, but I love franchisees and franchisors to be thinking with that ROI mindset around both sides of the equation, the franchisee and the franchisor. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that I think what makes the transition to entrepreneurship so difficult for people when they have a little bit of cash going into it. It's those are just some of those basic ground rules that people don't really understand. I see a lot of, experienced and new entrepreneurs making those mistakes. So it's not like it's not something that everybody knows.
No, and sometimes you just got to go back to the basics, income and expenses, cash flow. You need cash flow in your business. You mentioned Profit First and Mike Michalowicz, and he's been on the podcast before. So you're in good company, Nik, being on a podcast with Mike on the book Profit First. But it was a great episode, probably about a year back. And it might even been the Franchise Story podcast. So check that out, everyone. Mike Michalowicz. It was a really good one. But I'm the same way as you. I have money in different accounts. And sometimes it's nice when you actually do forget about an account. You're like, holy cow, I didn't realize I had this much money in that account. Sometimes it's the opposite, though. It's like, oh man, I thought I had more money in that account. I don't remember taking out a bunch of it. But you got to play those games, and you got to just be focused on cash flow in your business. And just experienced entrepreneurs, franchisees out there, maybe it's time just to get back to the basics on stuff and teach your team to get back to the basics of KPIs, what KPIs to track, and the cash flow, and just start. And I'm saying this because I'm guilty. I have businesses that I've let go of having tight controls over because I'm focused on other things. So get focused on your business and go back to the basics is a big deal.
Yeah. And so just to comment on that. So I have a bookkeeper that does my stuff, does my bookkeeping, and she, I meet with her, I met with her this Monday. I meet with her next Monday, going through little bills that we're going to pay. There's different areas I can reduce, some of those expenses. And speaking of the kind of the other comment of, as far as like bank accounts, the next phase of that for me, I have all these business bank accounts, but now because I'm trying to make sure that I'm setting up, a legacy for myself, I'm working with a financial, strategist, kind of like a family practice, who's setting up more accounts for me. They're helping me, set up more personal accounts now that I'm actually cash flowing and I have money coming in. I'm taking and I'm splitting up like those personal accounts. So for my daughter, for myself, I even have accounts that are for like travel, that are for, just, going out to dinner, just other accounts that I'm kind of starting to spread out on a personal note. When I log into my bank account, it looks like, I got all these accounts, but I have 2 different banks that are kind of splitting that up now. And so it's, honestly, I like it because it keeps me under some budget. And I'm, kind of on a side note, my daughter, who's really like my big why, I'm actually in the process of setting up her a bank account that she has access to, that we're going to use youneedabudget.com, that she'll be able to track how she's spending money. And, we just put together some ways that she can make money, which is going to be reading some business books. She's going to have some little projects on ways that she can make money. She loves tennis. And so there's some things that she can do in her tennis world to kind of make a few bucks here and there. So trying to kind of teach her those things. And it's crazy because whenever I teach her those things, I end up learning like probably more than she does while I'm trying to teach like basics of budgeting. So it's fun to do it in that approach. And then, because I want to teach her, but I also want to make sure I'm teaching myself as I'm going through the process.
Dude, I love that. How old is she?
She just turned 14.
So what a great age. And I've got, my 7, 8, and 10-year-old, our 11-year-old are just, they got the chicken egg business. And, it's fun teaching them stuff. And we're teaching social media. They're not on social media, but they have a chicken egg business that is on social media. So I love that and where you're going with that. And as you were saying, tennis, I want to hire someone to teach my girls tennis. And there's someone local here that's a tennis pro that I'm going to hire for private lessons. But there's so many different ways. A 14-year-old can certainly teach my 7 and 8-year-old some tennis things, and I would happily pay for that. So and I know a tennis guy that does a lot of stuff online. So there's so many different ways for your kids to make money out there. But if we as parents don't teach them some of the stuff and teach them how to handle money, having a good relationship with money, they're going to be taught by somebody. Somebody's going to teach them. And I know where they're going to get taught. They're going to be taught from the government that's going to be handing them out stuff. They're going to be taught by the school systems or the credit card companies. They're going to learn from somebody if it's not you. So I love to get ahead on teaching my girls things before somebody else gets to teach them stuff. And it's easy to get it started, but it's hard to continue to follow through with that. Speaking personally of the chicken egg business, because we still need to do some things that we'd planned on doing. But that's so rewarding as a father to be able to know that I'm having impact, not just financial impact on my family, but lasting impact by teaching them the things that we've learned, some the easy way and some the hard way, man. So that's awesome. I love that.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of it's through just exposing them to either your experience or other people's experience, because they don't, most kids don't naturally just do that and ask those questions. And I think, it's one thing I like about you so much. And you talked about on a lot of podcasts before we physically met, even though I felt like you were in my head, a long time before that. But, you talk a lot about asking really good questions and going to your meetups and asking good questions. And I think that's, a curious kid is asking questions. And I think that when they continue to do that later in life as they get older, I think a lot of times we have a natural tendency to not ask a question because we think we're bothering somebody, or not ask a question because it's embarrassing or something. And I encourage my daughter to, I always tell her to, because she's trying to meet new friends in high school. So I'm like, I went to SODAC. I know nobody. I know zero. And I'm like, I'm going to do she's like, how do I meet people in high school? I'm like, just walk up and give them a compliment and and just start talking to them. When you give someone a compliment, it's a lot easier. They're going to want to talk to you a little bit. So she's been going and having lunch with new groups of people. And I made and I'm pretty introverted around big groups. I try to kind of hide out. You put me with MD, in your parents' house, which was awesome because he's such a good like networker. But so it kind of pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And so I would be like, I'd remember things about people, I'd see something, and I'd try intentionally to either give them a compliment and then kind of introduce myself. And suddenly I'm in this deep conversation. And I was trying to be very intentional about like writing down names of people that I wanted to make sure I meet. And, my daughter is doing some of those things as she's meeting people in this high school that has 1,800 students. And so our conversations at night are a lot of times like, oh, I met this new person, I had lunch with this group, and they talk about really bad things. I don't want to tell you what they were talking about, but she's like, I'm not going to sit with them again, just different things. It's awesome to like, back then networking, it's a skill, and you kind of have to push yourself into those environments. And so I have this, you've kind of encouraged me to do that. I was so excited to come out and spend time at your event, which was one of the greatest events I've ever been to, because I've never met so many people at one event. And then I have this other event, coming up, the capitalism event that's next week, that I would have never gone to that. And it's like literally a mile away from where I live, but I would have never even known it's happening if it wasn't for those type of environments and just asking some of the right questions.
That's so true. And it's, one thing leads to another. It goes back to your original story, how you got involved in the business. You had somebody that was a money, they left, you still continued on, and the path was going to lead you somewhere. Like if you never continued to follow that path, we wouldn't be talking today. So I love curiosity. I love it when my girls are curious. And one of the things that I do whenever I hear them ask a question, I'm always saying, man, Sadie, that's such a good question. Here's why I love that question. Or Sienna, this is why I love that you just asked that. Or Sophia, I love how you're curious and you were thinking about this. And so I not only like their questions and I answer them, but I love to give them just immediate feedback that I love the curiosity and I love the questions. And then they just keep getting better and better. I think I've created 3 little monsters because they are question askers. And sometimes you're like, slow down with the questions. But I love the curiosity. And I love what you're saying, like coming out to this group. I mean, you're sporting the Sodak Shindig shirt. On the back of the shirt.
I am, dude. I'm wearing it.
On the back it says, the best shindig I've ever been to. So if you ever see somebody wearing a shirt that says the best shindig I've ever been to, they were at the Sodak Shindig. But that was a big risk for me. I didn't know who would show up, how many people would show up, how difficult or easy it would be. It turned out to be more difficult than I thought, more time invested, but way better than I could have ever imagined, with about 60 entrepreneurs from all over the country. I could say all over the world because there was one guy that was international, but from all over the country that came out, and most didn't know each other. So it was so cool to see like you there interacting with different people that I've known for a while. And that's how you grow. Listeners, like get into some different groups. If you're wondering like, how do I grow? How do I get better? You just need to get around a different group of people. And I've done that for years and forced myself to do it. And go to a conference where you have to pay $5,000 and get access. Be a part of the VIP of that conference, because then you're around people that paid a lot of money to be a VIP at a certain event. So if you're not ready to join a mastermind, pay $5,000, go to a conference around the people that you want to be like, and that's what I would suggest. But more than ever before, Nick, like your network is your net worth. I made a call. I'm vetting out a new franchisor, looking at investing a significant amount of money and having a controlling interest in a franchisor. And I made a call to 2 different people. One said, hey, this is a way that you could structure it that would work really interesting. I'm like, man, I never thought about structuring it this way. It was kind of a Roland Frazier type guy that I was talking to. And Roland would, I'm like, man, that would be something Roland Frazier would have said. But it was because he was in my network and I reached out. And somebody else yesterday, as I've been helping out franchisors with their sales process. Most franchisors don't have a really good sales process that they're confident in, that they know how to take someone from thinking about buying a franchise to actually buying their franchise. I'm coaching and consulting with them, and I reached out to a friend who's a franchisor, understands coaching and consulting. He's in a lot of the worlds that I'm in. He's like, hey, Erik, here's a better way to do the thing that you're thinking about doing. And I told Caleb last night, and he's like, wow, Erik. He's like, that is a way to scale that with less of your time and delivering more value to the people that you're actually trying to help. And so it's like a win-win. But if I didn't have access to these people because of my network, I would just be doing what I know. And that's where I see so many entrepreneurs. They're just at the peak of what they're capable of, and they really just need some outside influence to help push them, to show them there's a different way of doing things. So man, I'm so proud of you for like doing that. And you were doing that before we met. Just to be clear, like before we met, you were doing that with coaches and hiring people and being around that. But I just want the audience to like understand that there's real value in that.
Yeah, I mean, coaching is getting the right coach for me was a big one. I don't think I was doing very well in the networking standpoint. I kind of was, kind of had blinders on, but I think that, the probably the biggest thing for me is I had a really good coach that would, wasn't only focused on business. It was focused on kind of other areas of my life, family, fitness, finance, my future. He would help me, when I was scatterbrained or when something bothered me, and he would just say, forget about all those things. These are the only two things that really are important for you right now. I've had these experiences, but this is why these are the only two things that I think you should be thinking about. And so having somebody that you trust, that has, that's ahead of you, that is, that you respect, that can coach you down that path. I think that was really the big thing for me. And then, as business started getting better, I started realizing that I needed more perspectives of things. And so that's what kind of got me starting to think a little differently. But I think it can get overwhelming too when you get too many opinions, because they're not all right, and it's hard to know who. But I think having those intimate relationships with a couple people, or someone who's specialized, like you meant, like the Roland Fraser of deal making, or, the Erik Van Horn of franchising, and that's why, I'm so excited about our relationship and our coaching relationship, because I think you're going to help me, kind of pull some of the things aside that may be slowing me down to scale my business a lot bigger. And, so I can kind of see forward and not get dragged in the weeds at times, which can happen so easily.
It's so true. And then, and I'll leave this one last thought, and I want you to prepare for any last bits of wisdom that you have that you want to share with the audience. But as I have people like you pay me to coach them, they pay through the mastermind for me to help them. It puts a value on my time, but then I have to do that for myself. And so, as soon as you came into my world and started paying me, I paid somebody else to come deliver value to a group that I'm a part of. So like, you just have to be okay paying for access. You have to be okay paying for knowledge, but that is the shortcut to success. You have to be okay getting paid to understand your value, but then you have to be okay paying other people for it. So I love the discussion. I've never really had this type of discussion on the podcast. So thank you for coming in and delivering the firsthand experience of coaching and masterminding and consulting and and networking and what that means to people. So my advice to people is just start. You don't have to pay a bunch of money. Go to an event, work that event, and then pretty soon you're going to start finding value in that, and then you can just start to dive deeper into the world of networking. And you don't have to be around the most famous people. You don't have to have the biggest names around you. You just have to be around people that think really smart, they think differently than you, and they're able to open up doors and relationships to you. It's nothing better than getting on the phone with someone that's saying, hey, let me make an introduction to this other person that you absolutely need to talk to. They do a text intro and it solves the problem. Like, I love doing that for people, and I love it when people do that for me. Any last bits of wisdom, my man?
No, I think you said it well. And just to kind of knock on it, I mean, I think that from a coaching standpoint, I think a lot of people think that you can just ask somebody to coach you and do it as kind of a friend and not pay them. But I don't think you're really getting coaching unless you're paying someone for it, because it changes the dynamic of it. Even though they could be your friend, but like the time that they're going to give you, it's different if you're actually physically paying for it, for you and for them, how seriously you're going to take the whole interaction. So that was a hard one. And I think that comes from like a corporate world mentality where it's like, oh, I'm mentoring this, my boss is mentoring me, but they're really not. And I think it's a different environment for those people that are switching from a corporate world into entrepreneurship. You have to pay for people's time.
Yep, and it really does make a lot of people want my time. I get a lot of listeners and people in the Facebook group, they're reaching out and they want my time. And sometimes Caleb and I will do like once every 2 months or maybe every 3 months, we'll do a day where we will do helping people. We'll film it and whatnot, but I'm just helping people for free. But I can't do that every day. And so, but it does, it puts, when someone's paying me for coaching or consulting or the mastermind, I know that they need a return on that investment, and I'm happy to make those introductions. I'm always thinking about them on how can I help them, and you can do that for the people because they want that value out of that relationship. So that's why I like to pay people, and I like to get paid because it like you said it perfectly. So Nik, thanks for coming on, man. We didn't get into like how you're starting more locations. I know you're doing extremely well with that. You're getting ready to open up 2 more locations, running into lease issues, and that's just normal business. So man, you're like the millionaire franchisee next door. That's how I see you. People don't know how successful you really are, but I love what you're doing, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. Talk soon, man.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Franchise Secrets Podcast. Whether you're watching or listening, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and to whatever channel you're listening on. If you want my help with anything from buying a franchise to franchising your business, please visit franchisesecrets.com.